Hench Chapter 2. History repeats. Like how a taco repeats in my stomach the morning after. Brent ran down the hallowed hallways of his university. He reached the door to his classroom and stopped to catch his breath and swipe away the sweat that was dripping down his forehead. He slowly opened the door and slipped through the gap, trying to be as quiet as he could. Immediately, his professor shot him daggers at him from across the lecture hall. Lowering his glasses, the professor moved his eyes to the only vacant seat left in the room. It just happened to be in the middle, in the front row center. Brent had heard the term, if looks could kill. Well, in this case, it would be more like, if looks could boil your innards and then eat it for supper, would be far more apt. Pushing past some of his fellow students, he made his way to the vacant seat that happened to be in the front and center. He lowered himself into the chair with a creak. You are late, but I am more surprised that you even showed up at all, Master Brent, the professor said, throwing the test paper at Brent. I can only hope the reason is that you were up all night studying. Yep, sure was. Studying a case of beer, you old bulldog, Brent said after the professor was far away enough not to hear him. If there's one thing he hated more than history class, it was the history professor. The man reminded him more of an artifact from history than a living person. Okay, you got this. You must know some of it. Just try your luck with the A to D options. 2 will be easy to spot to see that they are the wrong answers. That leaves me with a 50-50 chance. Get half of them right, and I'm on my way to get a cool D and a great summer. Feeling a bit more humanish and a bit more confident, he slowly turned the page over. Ah, shit, was the one thing he did not want to see, was staring back at him with blank white lined eyes. Essay format question. Oh, double shit. He read the first question. During the Roman occupation in England, what invention did the Romans bring, and how did it change the country? Oh, triple crap. He slammed his head on the table and groaned, snapped his pencil in half, and just left the building. He walked home, seemed to last forever. Brent looked down at the ground, unable to think about what just happened. He had been ignoring the last semester. He thought, by some luck, he would have passed this year. Somehow, some way. He would ease on by, just coast on through. That by some act of divine guidance, it would save him. But it never did. He arrived at his house, the house that he lived in with his friends. Somehow the place looked more dirty, bland, dreary. It did not have the same party-go-lucky feel it once had. Taking a deep sigh, he opened the door, threw his bag to the ground, and crashed onto the sofa face first. John sat in the old busted old recliner and pulled the lever. The old springs made a squeaking sound, almost snapping as if they were about to just break underneath his weight. If it wasn't for the 2.5 rolls of duct tape, the thing would have split open years ago. As it stood now, the thing was more matted silver in color than the ugly 70s floral design hiding away in shame under it. If flowers could vomit from their own reflection, this one would have, several times over. So how did it go? Umph! Brett screamed into his cushion. He screamed again. Oh, that good, eh? Come on, man. It can't have been that bad, can it? He said, throwing a beer over to Brent. I drew a pair of hairy balls on the paper, snapped my pencil, and left. Brent took the beer and opened it, saving that yeasty aroma. Oh, damn! Somehow, I don't think that will get you a passing grade. He took a sip of his beer. Summoning all the strength he had left, Brent sat upright and joined his friend in drinking. Minutes passed in silence. Brett did not want to tell John or the other guys the real ramifications of his failed exam, but they would find out sooner than later. So here's the deal. That exam was my last chance. John raised a questioning eyebrow. I'm out of here, man. I was already on academic probation, and if I failed this term, which I did magnificently, I was told that I would not be allowed to carry on, that I'd have to leave the campus. He finished his beer and let out a big belch. He threw the empty can over his shoulder to the small mountain of empties that had gradually been building over the last few months. Mount Biramust, as it was dubbed by the locals. Letting out a low, loud whistle, John leaned back. You sure there's nothing you can do about this? Sure shit. Short of sleeping with the dean. Brent let out a loud sigh and buried his face in his hands. But the dean is 80 years old, man, and in a wheelchair. Like I said, dude, I'm out of options, unless somehow I'm the type of guy he likes, but somehow I doubt that. The two sat together, coming up with plans that landed somewhere between the bizarre and the deranged. From dressing up like a ghost and visiting the dean to show him the future if he kicked Brent out, to having him dress up like an exchange student from the Amazon. Even blackmail came up at one point, but neither of them had any dirt at anyone in the school. Throughout the talk, the other roommates came in. Once they were caught up with the situation, they all added their ideas. But, like the promise of a non-delayed flight leaving Chicago, nothing came that would ever help them. Tired and wanting to give up, Brent told his friends his last wish, to have one last blowout before he was kicked out. He would miss his friends, and he would lament the future escapades that he would miss out on in the school and the classes. He wouldn't miss so much, but his friends and the stupid stuff they would get up to, or the promise of it, that's something he would miss. So, that's the end of my formative education adventures. As the saying goes, it went out with a whimper and not a bang. I could say it went out with a bang, kind of. I think perhaps it was the biggest party I've ever hosted. We had cases of beer, gallons of vodkas, dancers, games. Everything you can think of it, we had there. At one point, I think even a donkey came in and started drinking from a beer cup. I don't remember much from that night, but I do remember it was quite possibly the best party I have ever been to or hosted. Look, I need to carry on before I get stuck in the ghost of party past. So, I left. I only had one place to go, a place I dreaded more than Vegas dreading having class. The one place that all college dropouts have to go back to. The old parents' home. Needless to say, they were less than happy. Actually, it's hard to say what my parents really thought. They were rich, the blue blood rich kind. Some families are called wasps. Well, my parents would be called Arctic wasps. They were that cold. I think the first time I ever saw them, I was 5 years old. The only reason why I saw them was because I got suspended for school and they had to fly in from the year-long hunting trip that they embarked on in Africa. I was raised by a group of nannies. They had rented out throughout my years. My friends? I had no friends. The only friends that I had were little children that belonged to the nannies, at least 3 to 4 years younger than myself. It was then that I said I would never be like my parents. I did see my mother more often than my father, but I think that was because she thought she was going to get another drink from the in-house bar and accidentally wandered into my bedroom in a confused stupor. So you could say that one thing that I got from them was my drinking ability. Where was I? Oh yes. So I went back home. Let me tell you, that drive back home was the longest drive in my short life. Imagine if a seahorse had a turtle and a sloth and a snail in a big four-way, and they had a baby from this four-way. That's how slow this trip felt. It was at least equal to that abomination of that animal orgy. The only saving grace I had was that it was more likely that my parents would not be home. And if they were, they might not even know I was at their house. You see, they lived in their own separate wings. My house, needless to say, was vast.